Well, what do you think? Do you think that there was the conventional concept of God, or do you think it just happened?
Well, that's not the full range of possibilities.
No, that's true. I mean, we could have come here from somewhere else.
That's also possible, but
where did we come from before that?
Absolutely. So you want to watch out for the infinite regress.
What's your personal opinion? You know, put you on the spot a little bit.
I'm a scientist, so I say I go where the evidence goes, not what I personally would like to do.
What is the evidence as you interpret it?
I would love to believe.
Your theory.
I would love to believe that there was a God who made us, who's looking out for us.
And loves us.
Loves us.
We need
takes
love.
care of us. And
makes us intelligent, guides us, and keeps us.
Such a mess. We're doing things so wrong. Then we would be relieved of the responsibility of taking care of ourselves.
The voice would come from up above and say,
"Don't pollute the atmosphere. Stop the chlorofluorocarbons." Right. That's right. But that does not seem to be the case.
We have to solve our own problems.
We have to solve our own problems. Now, on the question of the origin of life, there's been some very interesting progress made. On the early Earth, there are two different ways in which the stuff of life, the molecules that lead to life, are made. One, it seems very clear, it was made in the primitive atmosphere, lightning, ultraviolet light falling on the Earth, that kind of stuff. And the other way is, it fell from the skies. Because at the time of the origin of the Earth, comets, a lot of debris was being swept up. The solar system was a lot more traffic in it than there is now. And a lot of that debris, we know from the exploration of Halley's Comet, for example, comets are very rich in organic matter. So the stuff of life was falling on the Earth. Now, is that the hand of God or not? Well, if you believe in God, God established the physical laws of the universe. Chemistry is a consequence of physics, so all those molecules that led to life were made by God. It's possible to believe that. I'm not opposed to that idea. I just say there is no evidence for it. And where there's no evidence, I say keep an open mind. Don't commit yourself in the absence of compelling evidence.
Well, I think it's, I agree with you. We're going to have to solve these problems ourselves that we have today. And in historical religions, there are many wonderful, fine teachings, but none of them, they're all ancient by today's standard, pre-industrial revolution. And they didn't deal with the problems that we had today, because when Christ and Muhammad and the other prophets were alive, they didn't have nuclear weapons. There was no problem with overpopulation or environmental problems, so they weren't even mentioned in the commandments and the Koran and so forth.
Yep.
Carl, do we have reason to be hopeful about the future, and what can we do to have a hopeful future?
Well, I think there's a broad range of things that the average person can do, especially in a democracy where, at least in principle, the people control what the government does. Government's supposed to be working for the people, not the other way around. Also on a planet where things are moving very much more towards the idea that the people are in control. The Soviet Union, fantastic changes are happening there. Not yet all the way. There's not a multi-party system. There's a lot of things that they don't have, but the amount of progress there is absolutely enormous. Those are some signs of hope. Now, we talked before about writing to members of Congress and visiting members of Congress, writing letters to newspapers, television stations when they do a program that seems right. All of that is a useful application of the citizens' democratic prerogatives and has some leverage. It doesn't have a huge amount of leverage in my personal opinion, because there are a lot of other factors. There's a concentration of control of the news media in the hands of the wealthy. The wealthy have a particular perspective.
Yeah, I haven't seen any poor people owning newspapers or television networks lately.
Well, that's a good point, and also it doesn't always happen. I mean,
besides, if they did own them, they wouldn't be poor for very long.
Yes. So that's one worry. Another worry is that great wealth has a lot of leverage in a lot of different ways. And so rich people have a lot more control over what gets talked about, what gets seen, which opinions are acceptable and permissible, than do poor people. So just writing letters to newspapers or to members of Congress isn't going to do a whole lot. Voting does a whole lot more. Because the one thing that members of Congress and members of the executive branch, I mean elected members of the executive branch, president and vice president, are very interested in is getting reelected. And if it were possible for people to clear away the electoral smokescreen, the stuff that's intended to cloud your mind, the stuff that's intended to make you look at subsidiary issues and not the fundamental issues. If people can do that, if they can learn to think straight, then they have an enormous leverage, an enormous amount of control. So, I mean, in the previous administration, we had a president that thought it was good enough to label a very destabilizing, fundamentally first strike weapon, the MX, as peacekeeper. And as long as we called it peacekeeper, then the eyes close and everybody will be for it by naming it. We had an administration in which a transparent hoax, the Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, intended, so we were told, to protect the civilian population, got enormous support. Because the argument was, listen, do you realize that we have no defense against the Soviet?
The shield, the commercial with a little shield.
Don't you want some protection?
Of course.
And of course people went for that because the right questions weren't asked. And television, by the way, was full of graphics showing 4 Soviet warheads and a spiffy U.S. battle station going zip, 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 zip. And the warheads,
like an electronic game, you
exactly,
know, at the airport.
Exactly. And the warheads went away, and that's what we were going to do, and so we could protect the United States. It was not the asking of hard questions. So the next step, and this is something Thomas Jefferson repeatedly stressed, is that if you want to exercise your democratic privileges and powers, you have to understand the situation, and you have to understand it in a fairly deep way. You have to get beyond the rhetoric that politicians necessarily spread in order to calm everybody and to get reelected. So an educated populace is absolutely essential. What people can do is to learn the actual facts, to make sure that both sides of the issues are expressed and that there's nothing, by the way, in these issues that the average person can't understand. Average person is plenty smart enough to understand these issues, and most of those cases, almost all of them, which the government said if you have the facts we have, then you'd reach a different conclusion, that turns out to be bunk. Beyond that, there are a lot of other things people can do. They can demonstrate. They can make mass rallies. There is an American tradition of nonviolent civil disobedience.
It worked, too.
It certainly worked.
It helped do away with segregation, and it helped do away with the Vietnam War.
That's right. And it seems to me that is very American.
We ought to be marching for the environment. And marching and continue to those courageous souls that have marched against nuclear testing and against SDI. And
absolutely. So, for example,
we got to take our future into our own hands.
Absolutely agree. Now, let me say another couple of words on. Let me say one thing. For example, this next April, I think, there's going to be massive demonstrations at the Nevada nuclear test site, in which my wife Andrienne and I have gone there, been arrested before in nonviolent civil disobedience, because they're the Soviets that stopped testing. They say, you guys stopped testing, and we dismissed it. We refused to do it for a year and a half. They gave us, and they've said, you stop testing, we'll stop testing. Testing is the main driver that drives the nuclear arms race. If you can't blow up nuclear weapons, you can't make the next generation of weapons. I'm in favor of the next generation of people. Now, I want to say there is a historical perspective which suggests, as bad as our problems are, the nuclear arms race, the environmental issues, as bad as all that is, there is some reason for hope. There was once slavery on the planet. It is largely gone. There was once human sacrifice. There was once the divine right of kings. There was lots of stuff that today we consider...
Oppression of women.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't say that. All of that is changing. And we can change these issues too, because our lives depend on it. We're smart enough, we're dedicated enough to do it, but not by sitting on our duffs. We have to really work.
Take action. Okay, well, Carl, we're out of time. It was a real pleasure to have you here.
Same here.